Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking a look at this persuasive paper by Mitch Albom. Okay, it has to do with a current event that deals with Colin Kaepernick not standing up to the national anthem. What I would like you guys to do is talk about this, not just the subject matter of what he's talking about and debating that. I really want you to look at the writing itself. He's trying to persuade a certain group of people to think a certain type of way, so identifying audience, taking a look at how he does this is going to be extremely important. Okay, so at this time, you guys can go ahead and begin. I'm going to try not to speak during this one and just see how you guys do without me. And I might jump in from time to time. My main goal is just to come in at the end and kind of recap some of the things we talked about and talk about some of the things that you might have missed. Okay, so whenever you guys are ready, you can go ahead and begin.
Alright. So, we could just go through all the soap stuff to establish that right off the bat. I didn't do any research on the actual author, so all I know is the stuff Bradley told us about how he is the syndicated journalist. He's also white, which is important in this case. Anybody have anything else?
Well, I was reading online about him, and if you type in as Mitch Albom, conservative or liberal, all will come up as him answering a question about how there isn't a conservative and liberal, because he was talking about how muddy all the two different sides that have become, because back in the 1950s, if you said you were a conservative, it meant specific values that you had, and same with liberal back then, but today he doesn't think that there's actually a line, so he wouldn't answer the question. So that was one of my questions, what do you think he is, more conservative or more liberal?
So he's kind of in the same boat Rouch is in then, where he thinks the parties have gotten all screwed up.
Some of stuff he says in here, I don't really understand why he said that. When he said if you try to protest in Cuba or Syria or something like that,
he's bringing up the point of his main point throughout this entire thing is that you should stand for the national anthem simply because the fact that you're in America allows you to have the option to stand or sit during the national anthem without getting put in jail or arrested. And so he's bringing up all of these examples of other countries where if you did that, you would basically either be locked in jail or killed.
So is that what it means why, when he says that Kaepernick is fully entitled to his views and he has every right not to stand for the anthem, but that's the very reason he ought to?
Yes, and another thing he's doing there is because the people he's trying to persuade are the people who think Kaepernick should sit. He's trying to persuade those guys that he should stand, and so he's trying to avoid offending them as well because he doesn't want them to throw away the paper in disgust.
Would you consider what she just brought up antithesis? Do you think that's an antithesis?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm not good enough at recognizing that yet.
Before we define what's antithesis is, so we can kind of get an idea.
Two opposing ideas put in the same sentence and right next to each other.
Yeah, it calls that juxtaposition, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you think about it, you see that happen. Two opposing ideas put next to each other, two real. This could be antithesis.
In that case, yeah, I say it would be. Because it's the fact that he has every right not to stand is the reason he should.
I also asked, why is this topic so popular right now? Why is it being debated so, profusely?
Well, because of, the Black Lives Matter movement, everything is blown up and this just goes right along with it.
And it's not just Colin Kaepernick now. Like other people in the NFL are starting to do it.
Yeah.
And there's one guy in the MLB that was like, he didn't actually sit down, but he said like he would have. So.
I was talking to Bradley too, and he also said that it's mixing up a lot of different issues that we all feel highly about. You have the racial issues, and then the fact that he didn't sit during the national anthem brings up the right to protest issues along with the respecting the military issues. So it's a bunch of these things all wrapped into one hot mess.
Why is it an issue that you don't stand up? Like, I don't know what the portion of the national anthem is. Well, like, Americans think in a way that, like, we need to, like, constantly respect our values as Americans. So, like, the national anthem and the flag and, like, these things that, like, back in the day were really, like, important. Now they're not as important, but we still, like, respect them because it's a tradition. So, like, I feel like the people, like, not standing up for it is, people think that it's, like, really disrespectful because of how long it's been going on and it's what we've always done. So,
I don't know. I feel it's disrespectful to the people that have, like, fought for our country and, like, people that are in the military. Like, I don't think this Black Lives or I don't think that the racial movement has anything to do with standing for the military. Like, there are people that have died for our country and died for our flag, and I think it's just disrespectful to them that we wouldn't stand.
Let's bring this back to where we're going. So, who do you think is his intended audience? Like, can you describe him? Does he have a very narrow audience? Does he have a broad audience? Who is he speaking
Well,
to?
they're older because he's talking about remember the feeling of 9/11.
Yeah.
And like we're alive for it, but we don't really remember it because we're so young.
Okay, so it'd have to be someone who was conscious enough to understand what happened in 9/11.
Yeah.
So he actually making that comment means that he is referring to people that can actually remember what occurred during 9/11. He's not talking to teenagers.
No.
So we can narrow it down at least a little bit with age. What other aspects do you think, like what other language in here actually can identify his audience? Like who is it that he is talking to and trying to change their opinion?
The people who think he should sit.
Okay.
Yeah.
What makes you believe that he's actually talking to the crowd that supports Colin Kaepernick and not to Americans in general?
It's because of the one line that says he should stand.
Okay. What does that tell you?
That he's trying to change somebody's mind.
Okay. So people that already agree with him, when they read that, it's just like not a big deal. Right? He's just speaking to the choir. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to get the people that are on the opposite side.
And he obviously made a big deal about that line.
Yes. Do you think he's going to be able to get Colin Kaepernick to stand?
No.
So who is he actually aiming at? He's not aiming for the ones that are hardcore supporters. What is he aiming at?
What did you think?
People in the middle.
Right?
The people that are trying to understand the issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So by narrowing down this audience, it should become a little bit easier to figure out how he's tailoring his language. What is he going after? Which group? Because if it was a broader audience, he may not have taken that partial stand, right? Because he's alienating a segment. Definitely a segment that would be hardcore for Colin Kaepernick.
Well, he's still not taking that part of his stand.
Okay. What in the language makes you believe that?
Kaepernick is fully entitled to his views. He has every right to stand for the anthem. And then he says it later too.
incredibly fortunate.
Could I make an argument though that he's actually ripping on Colin Kaepernick in parts of this?
Well, that's what I originally thought. Like, I didn't think that he was like, oh, Colin Kaepernick is the greatest. I never thought that one. Because, like, the way he says it, like, he's, like, saying on the back, right after it says a time to unite, he talks about how, like, fortunate Colin Kaepernick is, and I think it was on the other side that said, like, he has 2 white parents, yeah. So, like, it's just kind of, like, the way he's saying it is really critical, and it's, like, if he's trying to appeal to an audience that doesn't know whether or not to support Colin, then I think that he made some wrong decisions in the way that he described Colin's life.
Okay, explain.
Well, because of how, like, he says twice, he talks about his white parents, and he's, like, fortunate to live where he lives. Like, yeah, obviously, but it's just, like, he says it in a, I don't know, the way I read it, it just sounded really, like, rude.
So, let me ask you, is there a segment of the audience that he may be shooting for that may find offense to that? Like, it's bringing up the fact that he has white parents who he's adopted.
Probably, like, the really liberal people. The people that are closer to Colin Kaepernick's side than the other side.
Let me ask you, what's something that makes this a little bit harder for you as a group to break this down?
I feel like because we all have, like, some people are more conservative while others are more liberal, so we read it in a different way.
So what you're saying is that for you guys as a group, it's a little hard to break down because of the fact that you probably agree with Mitch Albom a little more? Is that what you're getting at? I'm not exactly sure.
I feel like it's because we don't have really close ties to, like, the national anthem and the American flag. Like, we were alive during 9/11, but that didn't affect us as much.
Okay.
Because, like, it was a
So
big
you're missing
event.
the emotional
Yeah, we're
part.
missing
You
the
don't-
emotional part, and it's kind of just going over our heads.
Okay. And that makes it tough because when you guys have to do an analysis of something, you've got to look at it through the eyes of the audience, not the eyes of a teenager here in Springfield. So you really have to take yourself outside and put yourself in that audience and think, what does this audience think about this? Not what do I personally think about this? It's a hard thing to do.
But he doesn't, I don't think that he does a good job with arguing for his position, because he's like kind of giving reasons why he should stand, and he's fortunate, but at the same time he brings that sentence, Kaepernick should stand, in bold. Like, his argumentation wouldn't fit enough. He has to make that statement, that it's clear.
Okay.
So we're convinced.
Well, take a look at Colin Kaepernick for a second. So this guy is a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. He is a role model to people who look up the San Francisco 49ers. Like, I actually had to look this guy up because, to be honest with you, I don't follow the 49ers at all. I didn't know much about him. So I looked him up, figured out who this guy was. But the thing is, he's taking like this national spotlight, and one of the things I want to point out is how does he destroy the ethos of Colin Kaepernick? Like, there is something he does in here, and it's part of the argument. He goes through and he basically begins to destroy the ethos of Colin Kaepernick, because what he's doing is, if he wants to convince other people who might be on the fence that what Colin Kaepernick's doing is not appropriate, he has to kind of bring his ethos down, right? He has to kind of destroy Colin Kaepernick's character or his purpose. So, in what ways does Mitch Albom try to do that?
Well, right here he talks about how he was raised by white parents, and he talks about how it's not united, where he says about somebody. He talks about how he's not standing for like the police. He's standing for like the country.
Okay, so let's take both of those apart. Those are two separate things. So one thing, how does it get rid of some of Colin Kaepernick's credibility by saying he's raised by white parents?
Because he's talking about black oppression.
Okay.
He lives in a family where they're white raising him, so they're obviously probably not oppressing him.
Okay. So that would be one thing he's trying to do. Now, whether it's successful or not, we can bring that up later. That's a whole other issue. We recognize he's trying to tear him down with that, but whether that actually succeeds at that point, I don't know. The second one was the idea that he is attacking, or he's talking about a police issue, right? And what he's saying is it's a local issue, correct? And the national anthem and the flag are really a federal, much larger issue. So if you're going to protest it, it should be at a local level, not at a national level. He's saying that his protesting is like an overreaction. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah. Has Colin Kaepernick been personally conflicted with the police.
We don't know that, not from this article. And I don't know from anything I've ever looked up. I haven't seen anything.
Because, like, that bugs me. Like, if he hasn't been personally offended by the police and he was raised by white people, like, personally to me, that doesn't, like, he is black, but, like, that doesn't give a...
Let me ask you, would that change
He wasn't
your
raised
opinion?
up ghetto or anything.
Would that change your opinion if you found out that Colin Kaepernick was wrongly accused of something?
I mean,
It would, right?
yeah.
Okay, now since he's kind of arguing against that, you probably wouldn't bring that up anymore.
I have a question about, was MLK, like, personally, before he started his movement, was he personally, like, attacked by people?
Any black down
Any
south
black?
was, yeah, it's called Jim Crow, man.
That's, like, another thing, that was, like, how everyone was. Like, so, like, MLK was just another, like, black starting a movement. Even if he wasn't, like, personally, like, severely attacked by the police, like, or anyone in particular, like, he still started a movement, and people didn't think, well, people did think it was an overreaction, but now people look back on it and they say, like, oh, MLK did a great thing. So maybe in the future, people will be like, oh, Colin Kaepernick did, like, a great thing by starting starting a discussion that needed to be talked about.
So what you're getting at is you're talking about the timeliness of this. So, like, because we're embroiled in this right now at this moment, it's kind of hard to see what this might look like 20 years out, right? And we know that if this was 20 years, 30 years in the past, how people respond to it, pretty similar to actually how they respond today. And how do I know that? Well, what is the experience that I have that you guys don't have?
You're older than us.
I'm a lot older, but on top of that, I also have a history degree. And this is very similar to protests you had seen in the late 1960s. It's not the national anthem, but, you know, the Black Panther Party movement. I mean, we had athletes at the 68 Olympics doing this, putting their heads down. People thought it was disrespectful to do that during the playing of the national anthem. And it's the exact same thing. Only 40 years out. One of the other issues is this. If you're reading this and you're looking at it, there is two different Americas right now. There is an America that believes that we have moved beyond racial issues. And why would they think that? What was the turning point that suddenly made Americans say, "Oh, we must be beyond racial issues"? Something that
Obama.
in your lifetime, yeah. We elected an African American president. Obviously, we must be beyond it, right? And then there's another America that believes that we have not moved beyond it. Okay, that's the America that has had issues with police and how police actually protect, or in some cases, stereotype a certain group of people. So we got this divide. There's a group of people that firmly believe this is the America that we live in, and there's another group that firmly believes this is the America we live in. Who do you think Mitch Albom is speaking to? Is he speaking to the America that thinks that we're beyond race politics, or does he think that we're speaking to the people who are still thinking that we are in this racial war?
The second one.
What makes you believe that? Like, what in the actual article?
Because, like, if he was talking to the first group you mentioned, then he wouldn't have to put all these, like, abuse by police is not a federally sanctioned act. Like, he wouldn't have to put that in if he was talking to the other group, because that's what they already think.
Okay, so what he's saying is it's not something that is explicitly said as a goal of the police, right, to go after blacks. Okay. So that's why you think he's actually speaking to the audience that is thinking that race is not, we're not beyond the race issue. Okay. And there's you can use some historical proof to that, because back in the day, you go way back, we used to have laws that would separate blacks and whites. We used to have laws that would be harsher on blacks than whites. So you could make an argument for that's why he's talking about that. He's like, this is not the 1960s, folks. This is something different. Okay. However, if you are an African American reading that line, are you going to see it exactly the same way as a white person reading that line? Why? Why does that change the way you look at it?
Because, I mean, we're white, we're not personally affected by this.
Yeah, it's not something that you guys aren't getting persecuted at all. Like, you don't have to worry about it, right?
Well, and also by saying it's a local issue, it could be interpreted as he's saying it's just a small thing and not.
He's saying this isn't happening all over the nation. It's happening in localities that need to change their rules, change the way that police operate.
And it's not just like all cops. There are some that are good, and then it's not all cops. Like, there are black cops. It's harsh to say like cops in general and the police in general, because there are more than just the select few that
Well, that's
aren't
interesting
good.
because there's a counter stereotype now too.
Also, people say that all blacks are like criminals and thugs and all that. It's like the same thing you're saying, but the other way.
Do
Like,
they say it?
well, they don't say it, but like.
Please excuse the interruption. Could I have all freshmen, letters A through M as in Mary, to the cafeteria for pictures, please? All freshmen, letters A through M to the cafeteria for pictures. Thank you.
But, well, I kind of forgot it because Josh was going to say something, but, it was, now I can't remember.
Okay. We got a couple more minutes. What else do you guys want to talk about with this before we bring in the next group?
I would like to add something. Well, I don't feel like Mitch is talking like he has a problem with what Colin's like standing up for. It's just like he has a problem with like the way he's like standing up for it and how he's bringing media to the attention. Because by saying like, first of all, it's a national anthem, not the anthem of the United States Police Department. He's just showing like how like the way he's like standing up and like kneeling for the national anthem. Like he shouldn't be doing that way. He should like what you guys said, like it's a local issue, not like a whole national issue.
Well,
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
also in the next paragraph he talks about, I think it's the next paragraph. Yeah. He talks about, is it a problem? Of course, a big one. One that many we face as a nation.
So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that Colin Kaepernick is attacking an entire nation and we should just be protesting a segment.
No, I didn't mean it like that way. I meant like Mitch, like himself. He doesn't like feel that like what Colin's doing is wrong. It's just the way he's doing it feels like it's wrong.
What do you mean by the way? So like he's attacking.
Like there's like better ways to like bring like attention to the subject rather than just disrespecting like the anthem.
Okay. That's what you're saying.
Well, one of the questions I had was, should America have consequences for not supporting their government? Because right now, that's what it seems like everybody wants.
Well, this is a problem because it brings up a paradox in itself. If we allow people the freedom to protest whatever they want, we can also protest the ability to protest. So it becomes, do we say there are rules and you're protesting, or do we let everybody protest whatever they want and have it and figure it out themselves? Because right now, even though it seems like we only have one protest, we have two. There's the protest of the national anthem, and then there are the people who are protesting the ability to do that.
If America sucks so bad and like it's so terrible, and like people don't stand up for the rights that they are given in America, and it's so bad that they don't want to stand for our flag, why don't they leave? Like if they don't like America and it's
Well, that's just something
that bad,
that's
like
just something being said, but he's not advocating for that at all, is he?
No.
Okay, so this time let's go ahead and switch to your song. Okay, even though this is a very short article, we still have just kind of brushed the surface. There's a lot more to be said about this article. Go ahead, next group. You guys can build off some of the things that have already been said. I will only jump in towards the end or when I feel like we're getting bogged down in particular issues.
Alright, I have a question real quick before we start this. Where does it show two lines of the white parents? Because I'm only seeing one, and someone in group B said that there was two parts.
There was only one.
I think they all said one line. I mean, they said they had three white parents. What they actually said.
Well,
I've got a thing. I'm going to build off what Jack said. Like, I guess there isn't really anything in here that completely like comes out to say it, but I think Mitch is saying like, well, I guess he could be saying like the thing, he doesn't want him doing the nationally like televised thing against the national anthem because it kind of lessens the actual Black Lives Matter movement. Like, he does have 2 white parents, he plays for the NFL, he's rich. Like, he has nothing to complain about that we know of, obviously. But I think it actually strengthens their argument when it's people who have actually lived through the oppression and the police brutality and stuff, when they're the ones protesting. Like, it makes sense because they're the ones that have to go through it. And I think it just completely lessens their argument when it's people who don't have a reason to protest that are protesting, or the white people that carry the signs around like, what are you doing? Like,
at that same moment, I just want to hit on this. This is real important because I didn't hit on it before. Mitch Albom is a white writer from Detroit. Does he have the ethos to talk about black issues? Being a white writer, being a guy who, he doesn't live in a black state. Does he have the ethos to do that? Did he build the ethos enough to be able to talk about this issue?
I think because he lives in Detroit, maybe he's seen it, like, I'm serious, Luke. Like, Detroit is kind of awful. Like, everything that happens over there, like, sucks. And he probably has seen a lot of it happen. Sorry. I don't know why I looked exactly at Joe. I'm really sorry. That's not what I meant. I totally didn't mean that. Staring at me. Anyway. Like, he probably has seen it, so maybe, like, just saying he's, like, from Detroit, or he writes for the Detroit Free Press, he's saying, like, I've seen it, like, I haven't lived through it, but I've seen it, But I just think it kind of lessens our argument when white people or people who don't actually know what they're talking about are protesting it. Like, what are you protesting exactly? Like, I get the support, but I think it just makes everyone else look stupid, like 13-year-old white girls that do it at a high school football game. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, what are you doing? This isn't helping anyone. You just look stupid,
There's also that, like, when people say you're not helping your cause by cussing at somebody, how are you helping your cause when you're disrespecting your country?
Right.
Like, not only do you lessen your cause for being, not having the oppression, you're lessening the cause because you're doing something that nobody wants you to do.
Okay,
Like,
these are the things that, you guys are saying. What does he say? He's saying some of these things, but, like, you're saying that he's trying to weaken the ethos of Colin Kaepernick by talking about some of the things that have happened, right? Mm-hmm. So, for example, there is a situation here where he talks about a high school student in Chicago who refused to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and told the teacher that America sucks. So the point is he's trying to make what there? What's he trying to say about Colin Kaepernick? The fact that he's a role model did what?
Yeah.
Okay, so what he's trying to do in multiple parts of this is he tries to weaken the ethos of Colin Kaepernick. Because if you support Colin Kaepernick, or even if you lean towards him, he has to destroy his image in order to make his point. Why does he have to do that? Why is it necessary to do that? Yeah. What is the major weakness of this writer?
I don't think he doesn't have the ethos just because he's not African American. I think he's not focusing on like the movement itself and the actual like the police abuse and all that. He's talking about why he should stand for the national anthem, and he's focusing more on like the nationalism towards it and how our country's so not unified and how we need to unify. He's not talking about the actual movement himself. I don't think that degrades his ethos at all because he's not of that exact race.
Okay, so you don't think that Mitch Albom doesn't have enough ethos to write about this? You would say that he does because he's American, and all Americans can talk about nationalism, patriotism, and being unified in a time that we're definitely not unified politically or in a lot of other ways. Okay.
So, why do you think Obama agrees with Kaepernick, especially since him being the president, like, he has everything he could ever want, but he still, like, agrees with him?
Well, like, is that where it says, Obama said that, wait, hold on, let me find it.
he credited him for starting the conversation on topics that needed to be talked about. Like earlier in the other group, they were talking about how it's such a big deal because it's tied in with all these other things that are happening in our country. So like he's just crediting for him for bringing it up, and so they can actually like start talking about it.
Like it's a real issue, and he's saying like props to you for having guts enough to talk about an issue that not a lot of people want to talk about because it's something bad happening in America. And I keep like Mitch Albom talks about in here, like Jack said, that it says it's the national anthem, not the anthem of the United Police Department. So he's saying like don't go against the national anthem, but he's also saying abuse by police when it happens, and if it happens once, it's too much. Like that this is a real issue, but he's going about it the wrong way by protesting the national anthem instead of going about it a different way to make it more about the actual issue instead of against the United States itself.
What's the purpose of the lines where he starts talking about other people around the world who hold similar protests, but each one of those protests would actually be extreme? Like, the punishment would be extreme. What's he trying to do there? What's the purpose of those?
He's like giving like imagery and like pathos. That's what I said. Like we shouldn't be. This is how it's in other countries, but not the U.S. So like, so why should Kaepernick have any sympathy for getting credited for something that like really isn't even wrong to do? When in other countries it's so wrong and we like.
What's the emotional feeling he wants the audience to have? This pathos?
Sympathy for other countries. It's like we do what we can in America.
Well, the emotion. Like anytime you say pathos, you have to think, what's the audience emotional response? If you can't have an emotional response, it may not be pathos.
I don't know. I guess I'd be kind of angry.
He's hoping that they'd be angry at it.
Yeah, for getting away with something that people in other countries can't get away with, and even getting credited for it.
Okay. I'd also make the argument that is also logos in play. That's actually a very important part of this piece. So if you take a look at that, it starts really at the bottom of the very first side. Let me read some of this out loud. Kaepernick is fully entitled to his views, and he has every right not to stand for the anthem. But that's the very reason he ought to, because he could try his protests in other countries. Cuba, for example, where the government, on the mere suspicion of contradictory views, can charge you with dangerousness and lock you up before you even commit a crime. Or Myanmar, formerly Burma, where torture techniques for protesters include hanging people upside down and beating them senseless, and where a writer was sentenced to 2 years of hard labor in prison for a speech that criticized Buddhism. How about Syria? Their protesters have been shot and killed by the government. Or China. So what's ended up happening? What's he doing?
He's saying that anywhere else you wouldn't get away with this.
Okay.
Why do it, basically?
Notice he's doing a repetition there. How is he repeating something to drive home each point?
He's kind of asking a question before everything. Like you start off where it's like Cuba, for example, or Myanmar, and then you have how about Syria or China? Like and what he's doing is kind of like how you repeat in the beginning, how he's like
each place, right?
Yeah.
To make it very clear that in these country names should, when his audience ring out, these are dangerous places to protest. Bad things happen to people because they protest there. Now, he's making a logical argument there. How is he using logos in that section? He's definitely using logos.
He's saying that the candidate be a question because the press can't have the freedom to do that and not get money for parties.
Okay. What's he comparing? Remember, anytime you have a comparison, you should be looking at logos. What's he comparing?
United States and other countries.
Yeah, he's saying, you got the right to do that here, that's why you should stand, because these places, boom, 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 boom. You got that right because the federal government allows you to have that right. So what ends up happening is he's doing comparisons. He's making a logical argument that, hey, this is why you should do this. Now this actually serves yet another purpose. This is an extremely important part. It also begins to tear down Colin Kaepernick's ethos. If you agree with Colin Kaepernick, he's going through and saying, if Colin Kaepernick was here, this would happen to him. If Colin Kaepernick was here, this would happen to him. He's painting him as a what?
Criminal.
Colin Kaepernick? Well, maybe a criminal in another country, but think about it like this. He's overly entitled. He actually uses that word. Entitled. If you take that word in by itself, what does it mean to be an entitled human being?
You have everything that you want.
Which means that it makes him sound like he's being a what?
Spoiled.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a spoiled brat. You're sitting here and you're talking about how terrible America is, but you could have these problems in other countries. Make sure that you separate out this small issue with larger issues. That's where he really starts driving home his argument. And that's really the crux, or like the area where he's trying to make a real point. It's probably the most important part of this piece. Because you can see three different persuasive appeals being applied in one small location. How does that build up Mitch Albom's ethos by doing that? Because remember, it's really a battle between what Colin Kaepernick thinks and Mitch Albom. And in the beginning, it's very hard for Mitch Albom to write about black issues. Why? He's not a black guy. I'm sorry. I mean, you can't write about black issues unless you've actually experienced what a black person's experienced. Black people can't write about white issues because guess what? They haven't experienced what it's like to be a white person. They can only imagine both sides. So what he has to do to make Mitch Albom credible, he has to actually weaken Colin Kaepernick's his stance, his ethos. That's what he does though, to build himself up. Okay, remember one of the things about ethos is the ability to bring down the side that you're arguing against, or bring down the ethos of the person you're arguing against in order to make yourself look what?
Better.
Okay, that is a very, very important part of this piece. And really the reason why I decided to put this sucker on. But it's rare that you can see all three of them in such a small area. Okay, so at this time, because we're kind of running out of time here, I'd like to go back to your seats. Now, before you guys actually do Socratic Seminar this on Monday, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark mine up, I'm going to put it underneath the overhead, and kind of go through every little piece of this you can see. So what I'd like to do is get out your writing journals if you could. Now, last week I gave you something that says how to write an AP rhetorical analysis, paragraphs, and essays. I said you want to hold on to this bad boy because it's a lot better than anything I could create. This thing right here, what I'd like you to do is in your writing journals, I want you to try to do a rhetorical analysis of this very short article. Okay, try to sketch it out. And if you look here, it actually lays it out. It says introduction. Boom, this is what you need in an introduction. Okay, body paragraphs. These are the types of things you need to write about in your body paragraphs. Try to use this, okay, as a scaffolding to be able to write yourself kind of a quick, rough draft of a rhetorical analysis of this essay. Now, for some of you guys that are thinking, okay, I got to get an essay in fairly soon, I got to start working on these because tomorrow we really should have one of them in, one of them done. This would be a good one to use for a rough draft. Rhetorical analysis. It's actually very well written. It fits this model extremely well. There's so many examples in this one short piece. Okay, so for the next, we got about 9 minutes left in class. Try to sketch it out. If you had to write a rhetorical analysis for this, what would you write? Give it a try. You got to turn into 2 weeks for the end. By the way, has anyone watched the show Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman? Good. So you guys have seen
I
this
told
episode.
him, like, you know what, like,
He's going to talk
any
about
other
can we
game,
actually get rid of racial
I'd
bias.
still be kind of mad, but
We're going to watch
especially
that
for this game, like,
next
I
week.
like, just do not.
Called Through. He's going to have, there's one of his episodes talks about can you actually train
And
racial
so, like,
bias.
that could even get dangerous, like, if you rest it down.
Because this is unit 1. We're talking about persuasion. The big issue right now is Black Lives Matter. This, like a lot of you guys are actually,
I don't know.
They probably come up
you guys
with
take yourself outside of who you are. They try to take you off audience because that's the culture.
but I mean,
How do you continue
yeah,
to
they're that
lose your
good.
audience in your local?
Instead of trying to
I know, but they can actually.
are being put down.
They can have meetings and
No, but I mean, they can actually happen.
right, but like they can still like
Just sad, but so, I mean, that's what he's talking about. Except for like,
people that don't think of it.
I mean, it is, but.
It's not here, but like
Right.
for other places it is. Like the fact that
It's a thing for white people too, guys.
no, I understand, but like even like my own cousin like calls me the N-word, like that's like ridiculous. Yeah, like half of my family is racist, where I was born. So that's a real thing.
Please excuse the interruption. At this time, could I have freshman N as in Nancy through Z as in Zane to the cafeteria, please? N as in Nancy, Z through as Zane to the cafeteria, freshman. Thank you.